Please wake it up. Give him a warm welcome. Come onto the stage, Eren Aksu.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to Portland. Thank you to Shauna, Mark, and Farah. It's been a lovely 2 days. I've really enjoyed staying in Portland, Oregon. I think this is not going to be the last time that I come here for sure. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about immersive journalism, a concept that we've created that we like to think as the future of news and the future of storytelling. We're going to talk about why immersive journalism is important and why we think it's going to change the world for the better. I'm going to talk to you a little about what our company does as Emblematic Group. We're going to give a brief introduction to the history of virtual reality, augmented reality. We're going to talk a little bit about how to create this VR content. We're going to talk about the distribution methods that we currently have, what we might have in 5 years, 10 years, and then maybe 200 years from now. And then we're going to get into different case studies on the work that we've done over the past 3 or 4 years using this technology for good. So who we are, we're a group of journalists, game developers, designers, nerds, geeks that love virtual reality, that love storytelling. Our founder and CEO, Nani de la Peña, she started this company 3 years ago with the hopes of creating the future of journalism and news in a way that allows you to put the users in the middle of the story. Not only does this raise levels of empathy and levels of engagement, but it also allows you to really hit the user in a spot where they're not desensitized to the content. So we've seen larger call to action and much higher levels of empathy through the use of this technology. Collectively, we have people that have come from the LA Times, from the game design industry. We have 20 years of interactive game design experience, and we've been featured in all over the world in different conferences and film festivals. And we've tried to take virtual reality to film festivals around the world where they didn't really have a VR track. This is a picture of our team over there after the launch of the Planned Parenthood project that we built together. These are some of our previous partners. We've worked with everybody all the way from Planned Parenthood to Save the Children. We've worked with a lot of large news organizations like Al Jazeera, Arte, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. We usually produce content and software for these companies that are trying to get into virtual reality. So we've worked with everybody across the board, honestly. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the brief history of VR. This picture makes me smile every time I look at it. This is the Sensorama. It is a product from the 1960s that gives you the ability to smell. It gives you the sensation of wind. It allows you to have haptic feedback so you can feel vibrations on your hands. And it creates a stereoscopic 3D moving picture that you can see. The technology has come a long way. Since that time, the first wave of virtual reality, now we're looking at the second wave, which was in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the technology that was needed to create this virtual reality experience, it was still very, very basic, and it was very, very expensive. The lenses were too expensive, the GPUs were really expensive, and the computers required to run and create this content was very, very hard to come by, which let the World Wide Web take over the 90s. So the virtual reality never really came to fruition as the jetpack that it was promised. In 2012, we had the third wave of virtual reality, which allowed us to utilize the new graphical processing units, the new computers, the new chips that were out there, the new lenses that were very, very cheap to create the future of the content as we see it now. The $2 billion purchase of Oculus Rift by Facebook really kickstarted this third wave of virtual reality and kind of allowed us to get to a point where the jetpack that was promised in the 90s and then the 60s before that came to fruition, and that's where we are now. So now we have a lot of people in different backgrounds creating this type of content. So now that you know a little bit about the brief history of virtual reality, let's talk about how to create virtual reality. There are 3 current methods to create VR content and AR content. The first one is to film everything using multiple cameras, and I think Daniel mentioned this a little bit yesterday, where you have different video streams that are stitched together that places the camera in the middle of a scene, and you can place the viewer where that camera is. This allows you to take people into places, but doesn't really allow for a spatial narrative. You can't walk around in this experience. You can't really interact with this experience, which takes us to the second way to create VR, which is computer-generated environments. Using CGI and game design techniques, we can currently create or recreate environments from scratch using 3D modeling, animation, and game engines like Unity or Unreal. But this also creates another problem because this type of virtual reality is not as photorealistic as 360 video or 360-degree photos, which brings us to our third way to create VR, which is photogrammetry and videogrammetry. These are two new techniques that are very, very important that will change the future of this medium. Photogrammetry is when you get thousands of pictures and you stitch this content together to create a 3D mesh, and then you overlay onto this 3D world a high-resolution image. This allows you to walk around a completely photorealistic environment and allows you to interact with this space as well. So it's the combination of 3D meeting 360. At this point, we can say comfortably that we can walk in and out of pictures, which is incredible in 2016 and 17. The next logical step is how do we get people and human beings into these environments? Currently, we're using a method called videogrammetry that allows you to film people in a spatial manner from different angles and place them, their video form volumetrically inside a VR experience. This video gives you a brief understanding of how that's done.
AI brings you the best way to create and experience volumetric 3D video of real people. By giving you complete freedom of movement, volumetric video enables an unprecedented sense of presence and real emotional connection with the person you're watching. Up until recently, we could only get partial view of people in VR. Today, we're excited to introduce an industry breakthrough by enabling fully volumetric 3D video of people, allowing you to walk completely around them in virtual reality. We're on a mission to enable everyone to connect with each other in the closest way to real life.
So we have the way to create this content in a very photorealistic way. We can put people into virtual reality experiences and have them walk around and interact with really cool environments that can really put users into the story. How do we distribute this content? Currently, we have 3 tiers to distribute virtual reality content. The first way to do it is using products like the HTC Vive, which many of you tried last night at the party, and the Oculus Rift, the Sony Morpheus. These are all spatial headsets that allow you to walk around that require expensive gear, unfortunately, so they don't scale as well, but they really give you the highest level of performance that you can ask for in VR currently. The second way to distribute VR, the second tier of virtual reality, is mobile VR, where you use headsets like the Gear VR from Samsung. This still gives you the capability to look around and move around, but has a fishbowl effect, so you can't really walk or interact, and it's not a spatial kind of way to do VR. The final version of VR is scalable VR. You can send out hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these small headsets and just pop your phone in and you can visualize virtual reality. This is what the New York Times did last year, and it allowed them to reach millions and millions of people using this technology. Why then was 2016 and 2017 incredibly important as a year for VR? We've seen over $2.5 billion of investment go into this field. We know that a lot of people from different backgrounds, from journalism worlds, from the game design worlds, hardware engineering, software engineering, everybody coming in from different arenas to create the future of this third wave of virtual reality. And we've seen some incredible journalism and social impact use cases for VR that we're going to touch up on soon. Currently, we're getting the combination of multiple different industries in virtual reality, such as artificial intelligence and 3D sensor technology, which is really taking VR to another level. The specific use cases that I want to mention for the good of VR, one of them is a project called Project Syria, which we developed 2 years ago. This project puts you in the middle of a scene where you get to witness what it's like to be in the Syrian civil war. We place you in a bombing in Aleppo, so you get to empathize with Syrian civil war victims and Syrian refugee children at a much deeper level. We took this to the World Economic Forum, and we gave it to politicians and world leaders so that they could make decisions that were better informed before they actually start talking about what might happen in Syria and what kind of decisions they might make. Another project that was developed in the same arena was called Clouds Over Sidra, that takes you back into the story of a little girl named Sidra in an urban refugee camp in Jordan. This project doubled the amount of fundraising that came through using virtual reality. Initially, they were trying to raise about $2.3 billion. They raised over $3.5 billion using virtual reality. And they found in donation booths around the world that they could double the number of people that interacted and donated in using virtual reality. This was an incredible finding, which then took us to some of the newer projects that we started building. We're currently working with the Frontline leading investigative journalism series on building a story about life after solitary confinement. We can put you into a cell that is a 16 by 9 and have you go through Kenny's story, who's this gentleman here. He was going to go to prison for about 18 months. He ended up spending about 8 years in prison because of what solitary confinement did to him and the trauma that he got through it. So using his personal story, we wanted to shed light on the larger problem of solitary confinement in the US, because we've realized that we're not really helping these people by putting them into solitary confinement cells. We're making it harder for them to actually reintegrate into society. So we use virtual reality to create empathy and to create a visceral connection to the inmates within these prison cells. Another project that we worked on was with Planned Parenthood. This project was called Across the Line. We launched it last year at the Sundance Film Festival. This project allowed us to put you into the shoes of a woman who was trying to get healthcare. We grabbed real audio files from across the United States and placed you inside the scene, inside the moment in which she's receiving verbal and social abuse. We found through the research that we've done through this project that we were able to raise levels of empathy. We weren't able to change people's minds on abortion and how they feel about it, but we were able to raise levels of empathy for people that didn't really know what women had to go through on a day-to-day basis. So this video briefly gives you an example of what that looks like.
Jezebel feminists. You're worthless. You're a piece of trash. Maybe your parents should have aborted you.
These are all real audio clips, by the way.
And become a witness and be on scene and experience what these young women have to experience.
Shame on you. God's going to destroy you in the lake of fire, and you won't be smiling then.
I don't know that people really understand what it feels like to have people telling you what to do with your body.
We see virtual reality as an amazing opportunity to actually put someone in someone else's shoes.
Oh my gosh.
So we're going to have 11 audio.
And to show.
I wish I could show you the rest of the video, but I can find a link and send it out to the organization so you guys can all check it out. And this project will be released on Steam, which is the Valve platform that allows you to watch virtual reality experiences. So what is the future, knowing the case studies, knowing how it's produced, knowing the distribution methods? What do I think the future of virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, cinematic reality, digital reality, whatever you want to call it? At this point, we're calling them a bunch of different things, even though they have minor differences to them, because we don't really understand the technology. We're currently in the very, very early stages of this technology, so we have multiple different names for it. But what the technology really is and what it does is the destruction of the divide between what's digital, what's virtual, and what's physical in regards to the physical human beings and physical interactions that we have. So that whole arena of the destruction of that divide is called virtual reality, digital reality. I think in the near term, in 1 to 5 years from now, we're going to start seeing a lot of techniques that get rid of the individualistic nature of VR. We're going to see VR as one of the most social platforms in the world. That's one of the reasons that Facebook bought Oculus for $2 billion. We're going to start seeing headset technology get to such a point where you're not going to be able to tell the difference between what's real and what's not. EEG readers, devices that allow you to read brainwaves, will allow you to make complex decisions just by thinking of them. So you won't really have the input control problems that we have currently. You're going to be able to think of the complex decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis and make these decisions telepathically in virtual reality using your brain, which is just incredible, in my opinion. We're going to start seeing virtual reality be distributed through web-based virtual reality, through browsers like Mozilla Firefox, like Google Chrome. We're not really going to see any native apps, 1 gigabyte apps that you have to download to get to a specific VR experience. It's all going to be browser-based, and you're going to stream it almost immediately. You're going to have smart environments and smart characters that can talk back to you and go through multiple different scenarios together. I think next year, we're going to see Apple release a product, not release, maybe announce a product that is a similar version to the Google Glass, but much, much better and much more ergonomic and much more intuitive, that's really going to show people what's possible with this augmented reality technology. And I think it's important to mention the movie that's coming out next year, which is by Spielberg, which is called Ready Player One, which is going to use the power of the media and Hollywood to really show people what's possible in VR, AR, whether it's dystopic or utopic. So, at a final word, I'd like to end by saying There's a book by Yuval Harari named The Rise of the Homo Deus. It's a follow-up book to the book that he wrote called Sapiens. If you haven't read it, I would suggest reading both books. They're both incredible. He's an acclaimed historian, and in Homo Deus, he talks about human society 100 years from now dividing into two segments. The one segment would be the super mighty, powerful, rich, that can organically print organs and live forever, that would completely divide themselves from human society. And the other segment would be a poor mass society where we would just be kind of hanging out in virtual reality and be completely content with that. I would like to beg to differ, and I would like to claim that I think virtual reality is not going to be a tool where we use it as an escapism, but it's going to be a tool that allows us to understand each other on such a deep level that instead of living in a world that's very similar to Elysium, we're going to explore the universe together. So I'm looking forward to that future with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent talk.
Thank you.
Eren. We're going to get into a little bit more about the future of VR here. I know you were tasked with talking about the future of VR in about 15 minutes.
Yeah. Which is really tough.
Which, yeah, is not a task that I envy. But something I wanted to start off
Can you
with.
guys hear me currently? Got it.
Something I wanted to start off with, touch on, you've talked so much about journalism in VR.
Yeah.
Something that I think about is right now we have a cost barrier in experiencing that journalism that you create. And I was wondering, what do you think is the best tactic for dealing with that cost barrier going forward?
Like I said before, virtual reality is going to be a technology that allows you to access it through the web. It's going to be browser-based. You're not going to really need any complicated architecture to run VR experiences and run VR demos. The devices are going to get cheaper and cheaper every year due to Moore's Law and due to different entities coming together to create the future of this technology. So once you have hardware manufacturers create easy solutions and cheap solutions over the upcoming 1 to 5 years, and once you have the method to view these experiences become the web, the World Wide Web, you're going to get rid of a lot of the cost barriers that we currently see. I think that we're currently at a point where we're in the 80s. We have the Wall Street Gordon Gekko phone. The phones, the headsets even look like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to get rid of that whole bad-looking, massive headset structure, and it's going to be just a continuation of a monitor on your head through your reading glasses. I think that cost problem is going to disappear very quickly.
Now, you mentioned the iPhone. The iPhone is still a fairly expensive piece of hardware, even though a lot of people do have one. But thinking about that time frame, you said really quickly, are you thinking that this is something we're going to see start to fall away within a year, or 5 years, or 10 years?
I think the price for virtual reality and to do high-quality virtual reality for the very high-end structure of it is still going to be a little bit high. That's why we're going to start seeing a lot of location-based entertainment systems around the world. So you're going to see companies like The Void, which is really interesting. I would urge all of you guys to check out The Void. If it's in your city or if it's around your city, check out the location-based entertainment system that you could go to with your friends. It's a multiplayer experience. It's very high-end. It's very closed off. But they beat that cost problem by giving you that experience outside of your home. So you wouldn't buy the device necessarily, but you would go check out the virtual reality experiences. I think in 5 years, the cost of that location-based entertainment system will go down to a point where you can actually buy it in your own home.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people using a $2,500 device that you can't really see a lot of content on just yet.
Yeah, and The Void is actually a very interesting experience. If anyone has a chance to go online and take a look at that, it is pretty much as immersive as you can get at this point.
It's amazing.
So let's go ahead and open up to questions from the audience.
Absolutely.
Hey, am I on? Hey there. Check. You talked a lot about the potential for social good. Kind of a lot of the stories that you're doing have really positive benefits.
Could you say that again, please?
Yeah, so you talked a lot about the social benefits of the technology based on the stories that you're able to tell through it. But I guess this is a couple-part question. Are there negative consequences? And if there are, can you talk a little bit about it?
Absolutely. I mean, with every technology that comes, whether it's the radio, whether it's the internet, whether it's the TV, whether it's a mobile device, you're always going to have people that use it to create negative consequences. We've seen this with every single technology. I think it's important to note that even though the technology could be used for bad, that shouldn't take away from us trying to develop it now. I think it depends on how you want to use the technology. When you look at some of the physiological effects, if that's where your question is, we might run into issues with having Class 3B infrared lasers that point to us and scan the room to create positional trackers continuously. And we might also run into issues using screens about 2 inches from your face. I think these are some of the things that aren't really being explored yet, but these technology, the solutions to these problems are being worked on through different methods. They're using inside-out tracking versus outside-in tracking, and they're also looking at projection straight into your retina instead of having a display screen 2 inches from your face.
Thank you. And before we get into the next question, really quickly, I wanted to sort of go off of that. Is there any particular trend that's happening right now in VR that you're looking at and you're thinking that's something that you don't want to have locked into VR ecosystems? You know, something that could become a standard that we are going to face if it does get locked in.
Interesting. Currently, I don't see anything that rings an alarm bell. I mean, I'm always wary of the military starting to use virtual reality. It always kind of scares me a little bit because the way it can be used to treat PTSD, it could also be used to create PTSD, which ties back to his question. It depends, you know, it's the way you want to use the technology versus what the technology can provide. And so I'm always wary of the military use cases for a tech like VR, which could go in bad places.
Certainly. Let's open it back up to another audience question.
This is really on a related note over here. We've already seen in VR gaming that users can experience a kind of a motion sickness. I've experienced that in some games. I'm curious if you've considered that people might get PTSD or some kind of traumatic reaction to experiencing a difficult situation like you showed in the video of being yelled at by protesters or going into a war zone. And on a related note, how do we sell this to users that, hey, you might be experiencing something very negative and you'll come away having a negative emotional experience?
So I guess it's a two-part question. One, how do we get people to eat their broccoli? And then two, how do we prevent people from getting traumatized? Is that correct, my understanding of it? Yes. Yeah. So how do we get people to eat their broccoli in content? It's been a question for ages. It's difficult for us to get to people to watch content that we think matters a lot. That's why it has to be immersive. It needs to draw people in, but it also has to teach people a lesson. I think virtual reality is just another level of storytelling. It's just another tool for documentary filmmakers and journalists to use to put people inside the story. And I think some of the same problems that exist in regards to getting people to watch really important things will exist in virtual reality as well. But currently we have the wow factor to fight that so we can get people to watch really important things using virtual reality. I would hope that that would remain as we continue to work on this technology. The second part to your question, which was about the trauma, how do we prevent people from getting traumatized by using virtual reality? Currently, we're working with the IEEE to set standards for virtual reality and augmented reality content, the way in which it's consumed and the way in which it's produced and distributed. We're also working with a lot of journalists from around the world to determine exactly what type of content should be shown, what's too graphic, what's not, what keeps within the ethical boundaries of journalism, and how do we make sure that we're not scarring users when we're trying to relay messages. So we're trying to create the standards for the method of content creation as we speak.
All right, I think we got time for one more question we can squeeze in here.
One of the outstanding aspects of the internet use cases is interaction between people. So what's the opportunity with VR for interaction globally or within communities between people?
Using the web, what type of community? I mean, imagine a world where through the web, through a browser, we can get hundreds of millions, if not billions of people that could see each other in avatar form. They can also speak together and telepathically communicate. That's currently what's possible. We can visit moments in time, moments in history, in classroom settings or in business meetings that would allow you to take 25 students into the heart of Rome and have a conversation with Julius Caesar. Or, for example, go to the middle of a supernova explosion and actually see what it feels like as a student. I think we're losing a lot of people with a lot of genius because the way in which we teach people is kind of outdated, is kind of obsolete. So I think the way in which we can interact with virtual reality using the web and the way we can get web to have virtual reality released all over the place can really help the way we teach people and educate people. I think also another important note to make is the gentleman that was working on the Second Life internet site that allowed people to communicate with one another and live through their avatars. He's currently working on, Philip Rosedale, he's working on a company called High Fidelity. And his goal is to reach 1 billion people using virtual reality to communicate using VR and AR as their main means of communication and living. So I think there's great potential in the building of communities and the transference of information through communities using VR.
Well, thank you, Eren, for your time. I think we're all very excited to see how VR is going to turn out in the coming years. Still a lot of questions about it, so thank you very much for your talk.